There is a plant growing through the cracks in your driveway right now that contains more omega-3 fatty acids than salmon. Not per pound, per leaf. It has been feeding humans for 4,000 years. It survived the collapse of Rome. It crossed oceans before Columbus was born. And in 2022, scientists at Yale University discovered it does something no other plant on Earth can do. Something they called a biological impossibility. The herbicide industry spends $40 billion every year making sure you never learn its name. Your grandmother probably ate it. Your great-grandmother definitely did. But somewhere between then and now, someone decided this plant was your enemy. Someone convinced you to poison it. Someone made billions while you destroyed the most nutritious food growing free in your own backyard. This is the story of how the healthiest plant on Earth became the world's most hated weed. This is the story of Purslane. Welcome to Clean Eating Forgotten. The archive opens 3,000 years ago in the sun-baked hills of northern Greece. A farmer is preparing for winter. He carefully selects seeds from his best plants, the ones that survived the summer drought, the ones his family has grown for generations. He places them in a clay vessel, seals it with beeswax, and stores it in a cool corner of his home. He does not know that archaeologists will open this vessel 3,000 years later. He does not know they will find his seeds perfectly preserved, each one barely 1 millimeter across, tiny black specks that hold the genetic memory of a plant humans considered essential for survival. The same plant growing between the stones outside the excavation site. This is how we know. This is how we can trace Purslane back through human history with absolute certainty. The archaeological record does not lie. By the 7th century before the Common Era, these seeds appear in the Samian Heraion, one of the most sacred sanctuaries in ancient Greece. This was not a place for weeds. This was a place where humans brought their most valuable offerings to the gods: grain, wine, olive oil, and purslane. By the 4th century before the Common Era, the philosopher Theophrastus is writing detailed cultivation instructions. He tells farmers to sow purslane in April, alongside their most essential crops. He describes the proper soil conditions, the optimal spacing, the best time to harvest. You do not write cultivation guides for weeds. You write cultivation guides for food. Picture a Roman kitchen in the 2nd century. The afternoon sun slants through a small window, casting golden light across worn wooden surfaces. A cook reaches for a bundle of fresh greens, the stems thick and red like tiny rivers of wine, the leaves plump and paddle-shaped, glistening with moisture even in the summer heat. She tears them into a ceramic bowl glazed with olive patterns, adds oil pressed that morning from trees planted by her grandfather, a pinch of sea salt harvested from the marshes near Ostia, a splash of vinegar made from last year's grapes that had grown too sweet in the unusual heat. The taste is unlike anything in modern salads. Slightly sour, like a whisper of lemon, faintly salty, like a memory of the sea. The texture is crisp but succulent, each leaf releasing a burst of juice as you bite down. This is purslane dressed simply, the way Romans ate it at nearly every meal. The empire cultivated it across 3 continents. From the gardens of Britannia, where soldiers stationed at Hadrian's Wall grew it to remind them of home, to the farms along the Nile, where Egyptian workers ate it to survive the brutal summer harvest. From the hills of Hispania, where it grew wild among the olive groves, to the markets of Constantinople, where merchants sold it by the armful. Wherever Rome went, purslane followed. Not as cargo, as companion. When the empire fell, the knowledge survived. In 1288, a scholar named Bonvaisant de la Riva compiled a comprehensive list of everything the city of Milan consumed. Every food that passed through the markets, every ingredient that appeared on tables, rich and poor. Purslane made that list, not as a curiosity, not as a peasant food, as a staple that fed one of the wealthiest cities in medieval Europe. Travel east to China. For over 2,000 years, farmers there have cultivated purslane as machixian. The name translates roughly to horse-tooth amaranth, a reference to the shape of its leaves. They stir-fry it with garlic and ginger until the stems turn translucent. They add it to soups in the final moments of cooking. They pickle it in rice vinegar for winter months when fresh greens become scarce. They feed it to their chickens and pigs and goats because they understand something Western agriculture forgot. When animals eat purslane, the omega-3 fatty acids concentrate in their meat, their milk, their eggs. The entire food chain improves. In traditional Chinese medicine, purslane has been prescribed for over 1,500 years. Ancient texts describe it as cooling, beneficial for the blood, helpful for digestion. Modern analysis confirms these uses were not superstition. They were observation refined over generations. Travel south to Mexico. The Aztecs called it verdolagas. They sautéed it with tomatoes ripened on the vine and chilies dried in the mountain sun, the heat of the pepper balanced by the cooling crunch of the leaves. When Spanish conquistadors arrived, they found purslane growing in the most carefully tended gardens of Tenochtitlan, right alongside corn and beans and squash. The floating gardens of the lake city, those engineering marvels that still astonish historians, grew purslane in abundance. Travel to India, where they call it kulfa or luni bhaji, depending on the region. Cooks there mix it with lentils and spices, creating dishes that combine complete protein with omega-3 fatty acids in a single bowl. Ayurvedic practitioners have recommended it for centuries for conditions we would now recognize as inflammation. Travel to Greece, where it is glystrida. To Turkey and Iran and across the Middle East, where it appears in meze spreads dressed with thick yogurt and fresh mint. In summer salads brightened with pomegranate seeds. In stews enriched with lamb fat and aromatic spices. Half the world never forgot this plant. The other half was taught to destroy it. But here is what makes purslane truly remarkable. What those ancient cultures knew through generations of observation, modern science has now confirmed with instruments and data and peer-reviewed studies. In 1960, a physiologist launched one of the most ambitious nutrition studies in history. He wanted to understand why some populations had almost no heart disease, while others died from it at epidemic rates. He tracked over 12,000 men across 7 countries for 50 years. The methodology was rigorous. The sample size was enormous. The follow-up period was unprecedented. The results shattered every assumption about diet and health. The farmers of Crete consumed some of the highest fat diets in the world. More than 35% of their calories came from fat. According to every nutritional theory of the time, they should have been dying from heart attacks in record numbers. Instead, they had the lowest cardiovascular mortality rate ever measured in the study. Lower than Japan, where fat consumption was minimal. Lower than Finland, where dairy dominated the diet. Lower than anywhere else the researchers looked. For 20 years, scientists credited olive oil, the Mediterranean magic, the monounsaturated fats. They built entire dietary guidelines around this assumption. They launched industries. They wrote best-selling books. They created a mythology of Mediterranean health that centered on a single ingredient. Then in the 1980s, a new team went back to the frozen blood samples from the original study. They were not looking for cholesterol this time. They were looking for omega-3 fatty acids, the compounds that reduce inflammation, protect arterial walls, and regulate the electrical rhythms of the heart. The Cretans had 3 times the omega-3 levels of the Dutch participants. But they were not eating 3 times more fish. They were not taking supplements. They were eating purslane. Every single day, in salads and stews and sautéed with olive oil. And they were feeding it to their chickens and goats. The animals ate purslane. The people ate the animals. The eggs contained omega-3s. The meat contained omega-3s. The milk and cheese contained omega-3s. The entire food system of the island ran on a plant that grew wild in every field and garden. Scientists analyzed purslane samples in 1992. The numbers seemed impossible at first. 300 to 400 milligrams of alpha-linolenic acid per 100 grams of fresh leaves. That is 5 to 7 times more than spinach. 15 times more than iceberg lettuce. The richest vegetable source of omega-3 fatty acids ever measured on Earth. But the findings got stranger. Land plants do not produce EPA. That stands for eicosapentaenoic acid, a marine omega-3 you find in fish and algae. Not in gardens. Not in anything that grows in soil. The biochemical pathway requires enzymes that terrestrial plants simply do not possess. Or so scientists believed. Purslane produces EPA. The amounts are small, just traces. But when the results were published, other scientists questioned whether the samples had been contaminated with some marine source. They tested again. They tested samples from different continents. The results held. Purslane simply does something no other land plant can do. It contains 7 times more vitamin E than spinach, 6 times more beta-carotene than carrots. It produces melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep, in concentrations higher than any other plant food measured. Glutathione, one of the most powerful antioxidants known to science, the compound your liver uses to neutralize toxins. Potassium, magnesium, calcium, all in concentrations that make purslane one of the most nutrient-dense plants ever analyzed. A single plant, growing free, in the cracks of your driveway. A major clinical trial tested whether the Cretan diet could save lives. Over 600 patients recovering from heart attacks were divided into 2 groups. Half received the standard, low-fat cardiac diet that hospitals recommended, the diet built on decades of nutritional consensus, the diet their doctors believed was best. Half received a Mediterranean diet rich in purslane, walnuts, and omega-3 fatty acids. After 5 years, the purslane group had 70% fewer deaths. Not 70% fewer heart attacks, 70% fewer deaths from all causes. Cancer, stroke, infection, accident, everything. The study was stopped early, not because it failed, because keeping the control group on the standard diet became ethically impossible. The difference was too large. The evidence was too clear. Continuing meant letting people die from a diet their doctors had prescribed. So, if purslane is this beneficial, why is it not in every grocery store in America? Why do most people call it a weed? Why does every gardening website tell you how to kill it? The answer has nothing to do with health. The answer has everything to do with money. In 2022, researchers at Yale University published findings in the journal Science Advances that rewrote textbooks on plant biology. They had been studying purslane because it did something that should not be possible. It thrived in extreme drought conditions while simultaneously growing faster than almost any other plant. Most plants use a photosynthesis system called C3. It works fine when there is plenty of water. Corn and sugarcane evolved a different system called C4, which handles high temperatures better but still requires consistent moisture. Desert plants like cacti use a third system called CAM. They open their pores at night to collect carbon dioxide when temperatures are cool, then seal themselves during the day to prevent water loss. CAM allows survival in extreme conditions, but it comes at a cost. Growth slows to a crawl. This is why cacti take decades to reach full size. Scientists already knew purslane could perform both C4 and CAM photosynthesis. They assumed the plant kept these systems separate. C4 in one part of the leaf, CAM in another. 2 engines in separate compartments. The Yale team mapped gene expression across individual purslane cells. What they found defied everything botanists thought they understood. Both systems were operating in the same cells at the same time. C4 activity during the day for rapid growth. CAM activity at night for drought survival. The products of one system feeding directly into the other. The same enzymes recruited for different functions at different times within identical cellular spaces. The lead researcher described it as a kind of superplant, a very rare combination of traits that no other species on Earth possesses. The paper suggested this could represent an entirely new category of photosynthesis, something that had never been documented in any organism. Imagine discovering an engine that runs on gasoline and electricity simultaneously. Not by switching between them, not in separate compartments, in the same combustion chamber at the same time. That is what purslane does with photosynthesis. It survives on 1/5 the water corn requires. It grows in soil so salty that most crops would die within days. It produces 200,000 seeds per plant. Each seed remains viable in soil for up to 40 years, waiting patiently for conditions to improve. Every stem fragment that touches ground roots into a new plant within days. You cannot kill it with heat. You cannot kill it with drought. You cannot kill it with salt. One university study on solarization, the practice of covering soil with plastic to superheat and sterilize it, concluded that if Purslane dies from this treatment, everything that could possibly go right went right. Even temperatures that kill virtually every other seed in the soil cannot reliably eliminate Purslane. This is the plant the chemical industry declared war on. The global herbicide market reached $40 billion in 2024. That is $40,000 million spent annually on chemicals designed to kill plants. The largest manufacturers produce products specifically formulated to eliminate Purslane from lawns, gardens, and agricultural fields. The same chemical compound developed as a weapon during World War II was repackaged and marketed to American homeowners starting in 1947. The advertisements showed happy families with perfect green lawns. The copy promised liberation from weeds. The reality was a chemical assault on one of the most nutritious plants humans have ever cultivated. The industry funds research at agricultural universities. It sponsors extension programs that train the next generation of farmers. It lobbies for regulations that benefit chemical solutions over natural alternatives. It shapes the curriculum that teaches children what a proper yard should look like. Homeowners associations across America prohibit Purslane in front yards. They send violation notices. They impose fines. They require chemical treatment or face legal consequences. The regulations protect property values. They protect uniformity. They protect nothing related to health or ecology or human nutrition. Agricultural extension offices publish eradication guides with detailed instructions. Pull it before it flowers. Apply pre-emergent herbicides in early spring. Spray post-emergent chemicals at first sight. Do not let it go to seed. Treat it as an enemy. The entire infrastructure of modern horticulture treats Purslane as an invasive threat, not because it damages ecosystems. Native American populations cultivated it alongside their most important crops for thousands of years with no ecological harm. Not because it crowds out other plants. It grows in the margins, in the cracks, in the spaces nothing else can survive. The industry targets Purslane because it cannot be controlled. You cannot patent a plant that has grown wild for 4,000 years. You cannot create a genetically modified variety with a terminator gene that forces farmers to buy new seeds every season. You cannot build recurring revenue from something that reproduces freely and abundantly across every climate zone where humans live. Every other omega-3 source is a controlled market. Wild fish populations are collapsing from decades of industrial overfishing. Farmed salmon requires billions of dollars in infrastructure, specialized feeds, antibiotics to prevent disease in crowded conditions, and processing facilities that employ thousands. Flaxseed oil goes rancid within weeks of opening and must be refrigerated constantly. Chia seeds cost $15 per pound and require specific growing conditions. Fish oil supplements sell for $20 per bottle and require massive manufacturing operations, supply chains that span oceans, and marketing budgets that dwarf the GDP of small countries. Purslane grows for free. It produces more omega-3 per acre than any cultivated crop ever measured. It asks for nothing but sunlight and occasional rain. It requires no fertilizer, no pesticides, no irrigation systems, no specialized equipment, no expertise, no investment. The plant that could revolutionize human nutrition is classified as the world's most common weed. The solution we need is already here. It has been here for 4,000 years. And $40 billion depends on making sure you keep destroying it. But the knowledge was never lost. In villages across Greece, grandmothers still gather glystrata in the early morning, when the dew makes the leaves extra crisp and the summer heat has not yet turned harsh. They dress it simply with olive oil and lemon, the way their grandmothers taught them, the way their grandmothers' grandmothers ate it before the fall of Rome, before the rise of Christianity, before Alexander marched east. In markets across Mexico City, vendors sell bundles of verdolagas every morning before sunrise. Street cooks sauté it with pork and green salsa for workers heading to early shifts. Families eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, without ever thinking of it as exotic or unusual or special. It is simply food, the way it has always been. In traditional Chinese medicine clinics, practitioners still prescribe Purslane for conditions that Western medicine treats with expensive pharmaceuticals. The knowledge persists in herbals passed down through generations, in family recipes, in the collective memory of cultures that never accepted the idea that food should come only from stores. In research laboratories across the world, scientists are studying Purslane not as a weed to eliminate, but as a model for the crops of the future. If they can understand how it performs that impossible photosynthetic trick, they might be able to engineer other plants to survive climate change. They might be able to feed billions as rainfall patterns shift and temperatures rise. But the plant they are trying to replicate is already in your driveway. Something is changing. Farmers markets in America now feature Purslane from small organic farms. Restaurant chefs in New York and Los Angeles put it on tasting menus at prices that would have baffled our grandparents. $30 for a salad of the same plant their great-grandmothers pulled from between the tomatoes. Health food stores stock it in the specialty greens section. Nutritionists recommend it to clients seeking plant-based omega-3 sources. Wellness influencers post recipes to millions of followers who have never heard of Purslane but recognize a superfood when they see one. Sales of fresh Purslane increased 43% last year alone. Seed catalogs now offer cultivated varieties bred for larger leaves and milder flavor. Growing guides appear on homesteading websites and permaculture forums and sustainable living blogs. The information wants to spread. And it is spreading. Every person who learns to identify Purslane is one more person who stops poisoning their own food supply. Every family that adds it to their garden is one less customer for the $40 billion herbicide industry. Every community that shares seeds and recipes is one more crack in the wall of forgetting. Reclaiming this knowledge is surprisingly simple. Step 1. Learn to identify Purslane with absolute certainty. The stems are thick and succulent, usually red or reddish-green, smooth and hairless. The leaves are paddle-shaped, fleshy, growing in clusters along the stems. When you break a stem, it feels juicy, almost translucent inside, never dry or fibrous. The flowers are tiny and yellow, usually tucked between the leaves where they meet the stem. They open only in morning sunlight, closing by afternoon. There is one plant that resembles Purslane called spurge. The difference is unmistakable. Break the stem. If milky white sap appears, that is spurge. Do not eat it. Purslane sap is clear and watery. Always test before eating any foraged plant. Step 2. Stop poisoning it. This is the most important step. If Purslane appears in your garden, leave it. If it grows between your patio stones, let it spread. If it comes up in your lawn, consider that maybe the lawn is the invader and Purslane is the native. Every bottle of herbicide you do not buy is money taken from an industry that profits from your ignorance. Step 3. Harvest it young. The best leaves come from plants in their first 6 weeks of growth, before they flower. The texture is most tender. The flavor is brightest. As plants mature, the stems become woody, and the leaves develop a stronger, sometimes bitter taste. Cut stems about 2 inches above the soil line. The plant will regrow. You can harvest the same patch multiple times throughout summer. Step 4. Eat it in ways that preserve its nutrients. Raw Purslane in salads delivers maximum omega-3 content. The leaves have a lemony tang and a pleasant crunch, like a succulent version of spinach that tastes faintly of the sea. Sauté it briefly with olive oil and garlic. The heat should wilt the leaves, but not cook them to mush. The stems stay slightly crunchy even when warm. Add it to smoothies for a nutritional boost without much flavor change. Pickle it in vinegar for a winter preserve. Stir it into soups at the last moment, after removing the pot from heat. The goal is to eat it often, the way the Cretans did, the way the Chinese still do, the way humans ate it for 4,000 years before someone decided it was your enemy. Step 5. Save the seeds. One Purslane plant produces enough seeds to cover an entire garden. Let a few plants flower and go to seed in late summer. The seed pods are tiny capsules that open when ripe. scattering thousands of black specks smaller than poppy seeds. Collect them by placing a paper bag over the mature seed heads and shaking gently. Store in a cool, dry place. They remain viable for years. Step 6. Teach someone else what you have learned. Share seeds with neighbors. Bring Purslane salad to gatherings. Tell the story of how the most nutritious plant on earth became the world's most hated weed. Every person who learns this information becomes part of the restoration. The story of Purslane is not about one plant. It is about a system that profits from your confusion. An industry that learned to market destruction as improvement. A culture that forgot what food looks like when it grows wild and free. For 4,000 years, humans understood that the best nutrition often comes from plants we do not need to cultivate. Wild foods that thrive without our intervention. Resilient species that survived ice ages and empires and the rise and fall of civilizations. We traded that understanding for perfect lawns and chemical dependency. We learned to see abundance as infestation. We were taught that food comes from stores, not from the cracks in our driveways. But forgetting is not final. The knowledge of how to eat wild food was never erased. It was just buried beneath $40 billion of marketing, hidden behind regulations and violation notices and cultural assumptions about what a yard should look like. Purslane is still here. It has been waiting for 4,000 years. Growing in sidewalk cracks and abandoned lots and the edges of parking lots and anywhere else the herbicides have not reached. The richest source of omega-3 fatty acids on land is not in a supplement bottle. It is not in a fish farm. It is not behind a prescription counter. It is in your driveway right now. This knowledge is not hidden anymore. It is yours. The choice is yours. If this archive opens something for you, subscribe to Clean Eating Forgotten and hit the bell. Every like and share helps preserve this wisdom. The next archive opens soon.